Well, as we talked about earlier in the pod, another big weekend of sports, a couple of tentpole events on the calendar. One of those, obviously, the Daytona 500. And who better to break it all down than our motorsports maven, Adam Stern, who's going to be on the ground at Daytona International Speedway. Adam, thanks for joining the pod.
Thanks for having me on.
Adam, you went in depth on the NASCAR season, the upcoming season in SBJ this week. One of the things you wrote about is how NASCAR is starting its new media rights deal with a bunch of new partners this season. What is this season going to look like from a media perspective?
Yeah, Austin, we spoke with NASCAR EVP Brian Herbst, who runs their media, and he was noting that NASCAR has been kind of preparing for this new era in 2025 since like 2018. So this has been a long time coming for the sport. They've been preparing for this for a long time, and now they're here. They're going from 2 domestic media rights partners to 5 all of a sudden. So it's a big switch for the sport, and they're also entering the streaming age. They're going to have Amazon Prime Video exclusively streaming Cup races for the first time ever. They used to, of course, have their races, and they still do simulcast, when they're airing on linear TV. But this will be the first time ever that they have 5 races exclusively streamed digitally. So it's a big year for a lot of reasons. They were able to get a roughly 35 to 40% increase on their media rights. They brought in Prime Video. They brought in CW to cover the Xfinity series exclusively. It's the CW's biggest ever investment from what they told us, $115 million a year. And then WBD will be covering the sport as well. That'll be 5 races for WBD and 5 for Amazon, 10 in the middle of the season in total. So a lot of people are watching out for things like, how is their production going to be? There was talk at one point of, could they maybe even share production? It sounds like from what we hear from WBD executive Craig Berry that ultimately they did not do that. They're going to both do their own thing, Prime and WBD. But a lot of people will be watching out for how they cover the sport. We just reported today that the CW has a new graphics package this year. It kind of used to be with Fox and NBC that they would use a vertical one. And now the CW feels like with these new widescreen TVs that everyone has, they can fit all of it on horizontal. So you can show all of the leaders out, all of the drivers at once, whereas it used to kind of rotate on a board in a vertical fashion. So new graphics, new production, new partners, new money that'll be distributed to the teams and the drivers. There's new things that NASCAR is doing with the drivers as well, where they're paying them directly to help promote the sport, something called the Driver Ambassador Program that we've reported on. So it's a new era for the sport and a lot of new things going along with it.
There's also that new in-season tournament. Are the majority of those races going to be on either TNT or Prime Video? How is that spread out?
Yeah, that's a great point as well. They're also kind of copying the NBA. They're doing the in-season tournament, and basically both WBD and Prime Video will get to be part of that. So some of the qualifying races will be on one, and then the actual races that will be part of the in-season tournament will be on the other. And so they're both kind of giving a bone to their new partners. Also, the one major race this year that's new for points races is a race in Mexico City. It's NASCAR's first race outside the U.S. for a points race since 1958. Prime Video got that positioning, very plum position to get. It'll be interesting to see if WBD pushes to get a new race next year, since they didn't really get a new race this year, but they did get the Chicago Street Race. That'll be in its 3rd edition, 3rd and potentially final, before they look to maybe move on to a new city like San Diego. But that's been one of the most exciting races the last 2 seasons, and WB did get that. So they got a good schedule as well from their perspective. So both new broadcasters were given some interesting opportunities this year.
I will say my parents who live in Chicago will be happy that the street race is moving on from that city. But Adam, so something that's really interesting in your reporting is this emphasis on shoulder programming that NASCAR is investing in. What do you see as the importance of kind of fresh content for NASCAR?
Yeah, well, we all saw what Drive to Survive did for Formula One, and everybody's been chasing that in sports ever since, let alone other motorsports properties. So we spoke with NASCAR president Steve Phelps, and he noted that they're going to have to hit, in his words with a baseball analogy, singles, but that they're going to also have to hit some upper deck grand slams. They brought on John Dahl, a former longtime ESPN executive last year, as their head of content, and he's been cooking up a lot. And I think a lot of it's going to bear fruit this year. Maybe it wasn't as much last year as he was kind of getting into the role. And of course, we also know NASCAR EVP Tim Clark, their chief brand officer. He's deeply involved as well. We spoke with him as well, and he said they have over a dozen projects in the works, documentaries, docuseries, things they're working on for feature films. Of course, we know F1 has a huge feature film coming out this year with Brad Pitt and Warner Brothers and Apple Original Films. So, F1 is really keeping everyone on their toes to a certain degree. And NASCAR was working on change before the pandemic and before F1 got big. Steve Phelps came into this role in 2018, and he's really been reinventing things ever since. But nonetheless, motorsports is a competitive property right now, competitive sector, I should say. Yeah, NASCAR is working on a lot and hoping that they can find their own Drive to Survive effect. They'll also have season 2 of Netflix, their series that will be coming back as well in the next couple months.
Well, with the baseball analogy, single score runs. So
yes, they can.
That's true. You absolutely need singles as well. It all adds up. Obviously, I think it was Drive to Survive was that upper deck grand slam for F1 is the reality. And they've got an interesting situation as well this year with their media rights up and what will happen with that. But yeah, NASCAR no doubt looking to find some success with the content. And they've had some success in the past couple of years as well, but want to find more this year.
Well, you and I will be staying in close touch over F1's media rights deals.
No doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely. It'll be really interesting to see, with F1's exclusive window having lapsed, they weren't able to get a deal. From what we understand, what we hear, that's an indication that F1 is seeking for a major increase in their rights fees. Currently, they're getting $90 million right now from ESPN. Seems like given that lapse, that whatever F1 is now asking, ESPN wasn't willing to meet that right away. So now F1 is out talking to different companies. There's been reports that Netflix will make a bid. Obviously, they know Netflix very well, but there could be some other players as well. So it will be very interesting to see what happens there this year and whether ESPN sticks with it. I mean, ESPN has been very important for F1, I think. And so if ESPN were to go away, that'll be a big thing to keep an eye on, is whether they can still keep that cultural cachet without ESPN.
All right, Adam, we'll get you out of here on this. I didn't bring on Steve Phelps or Brian Herbst to this particular podcast because I thought I jinxed them with the Daytona rain last year. Turns out the rain gods maybe head there anyways. How much does rain potentially impact not just the Daytona 500 number, but the whole season for NASCAR Cup Series?
Last Friday, the early forecast was looking good. It was a 0% chance of rain. And then something changed over this past weekend, and now it's looking like it could well rain on the Sunday of the Daytona 500. So it's a huge deal for NASCAR whether there's a couple, hours of rain in Central Florida on the day that they determine, when they decide to hold the Daytona 500. It can affect the entire season. Last year they had rain, as you noted, and they were able to dig out of the hole afterwards. I mean, the Daytona 500 was down like 25% year over year. They were able to dig out of that hole and ultimately end up 1% for the season. But it was like the first time they were ever able to do that. And partially that's because their ratings aren't quite as high as they used to be. So if something like this happens, it's a little easier to dig out of the hole. So it is very tough when they face rain. And, doesn't look like it's a washout. So, Central Florida weather can be tricky. So they'll hope for the best. But certainly, they were hoping to see that precipitation chance stay 0%. And right now, around the time of the race, it says 50, 60%. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And if it does happen, it impacts their ratings dramatically. Last year was down about 25%.
Yeah, like you said, it was incredibly impressive to me that they were able to dig out of that hole last season. It took them all season, but they were able to do that. Very impressive. And it would suck to have to try to do that again. So let's hope the weather cooperates.
Absolutely.
Well, the Daytona 500 is on Sunday on Fox, another big weekend for that network. Adam Stern dropping all the latest on us. Appreciate you coming on the pod, and good luck down in Florida.
Thank you.